Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to today's Explainer. So, today we are unpacking an absolutely incredible, truly powerful concept, what it actually means to be part of a chosen generation and a royal priesthood. We're going to take a really deep dive into 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, and honestly, we're going to see what this majestic title really, truly demands of us.
Here is the roadmap for this explainer. 1. The identity. 2. The historical roots. 3. The warning of pride. And finally, 4. The ultimate duty. Let's just jump right in.
Okay, section 1, the identity, unpacking 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9.
Just, take a second and really listen to the sheer magnitude of these titles. A chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people. Wow, these aren't just pretty poetic words, right? They point to a very specific, highly elevated spiritual status. This is a massive, massive shift in our identity.
But here's the thing. This identity shift doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There is a literal, profound transfer taking place here. As believers, we are pulled directly out of total spiritual darkness and translated right into God's marvelous light. It's a rescue mission. You aren't just handed a fancy title and left where you are completely rescued and repositioned for a very specific divine purpose.
That brings us to section 2, the historical roots, the Levites in the Old Testament.
To truly wrap our heads around this whole priesthood idea, we've got to look back at how God originally structured his chosen people. It's kind of like tracing a spiritual family tree. Originally, God claimed the entire nation of Israel, specifically their firstborns, as his own. But then, God substituted the tribe of the Levites in place of those firstborns. And today, well, through Christ, believers are adopted and grafted right into this exact historical and spiritual lineage.
So, you might be wondering, who exactly were the Levites? Simply put, they were a tribe strictly dedicated to God's temple service. They literally got zero land inheritances like the other tribes did. A Levite didn't grow up dreaming of being an engineer or a doctor, Their entire 24/7 existence was completely dedicated to serving God, protecting his word, and maintaining the temple. It was their whole life. Think about the stark contrast here for a second. An ordinary Israelite inherited land, fought in the wars, and lived a relatively normal, everyday life. But the Levite priest? They lived solely for God's service, no exceptions. This proves that being part of a holy nation originally meant being completely, 100% set apart. It wasn't just a status symbol, it was a life of absolute consecration.
Moving on to section 3, the warning of pride. Grace, not merit.
Now, claiming these massive world-changing titles can super easily lead to spiritual arrogance, right? So we absolutely need to remember where we came from. Before, you were aliens, hopeless, without mercy. Essentially, you were nothing in the grand scheme of the spiritual kingdom. But now you are God's people who have received immense mercy. The contrast is brutal, but it proves one crucial thing. Your new status was achieved entirely by God's sheer grace, absolutely not by your own merit. There's actually a really beautiful, touching analogy for this. It's the concept of being les pâles de Pâques, which means adopted children. Believers are adopted by pure, unadulterated grace. We weren't the biological firstborns. Israel held that historical title. We were substituted in by God's incredible love. And honestly, remembering our adoption should just completely wipe out any room for arrogance. And because of this immense grace, a true priest has to wear the right spiritual garments. According to Colossians chapter 3, verse 12, the virtues of the chosen aren't pride and status. No way. They are mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. You simply can't claim the title of a royal priest without dressing the part spiritually, right? The whole attitude has to change.
Actually, Proverbs chapter 30, verse 32 offers a pretty stern piece of advice for this exact situation. It says, "If you have been foolish in exalting yourself, put your hand on your mouth." Literally, just cover your mouth. If you find yourself constantly bragging about being the chosen generation, it's probably time to stop talking. We need to let God do the praising. Our job is just to do the serving.
Which naturally brings up a totally fascinating and honestly pretty provocative question. Why were you chosen? If it's not so we can boast, and it's definitely not a status symbol to lord over other people, what is the actual, actionable purpose of this immense privilege?
And that brings us to section 4, the ultimate duty, spreading the light.
If we break down Malachi chapter 2, verse 7, the functional steps of a priest become incredibly clear. It's like a job description. First, you must protect God's knowledge. Second, you teach the law. And third, you speak as God's messenger. Just like those Levites who physically protected the scriptures back in the day, today's royal priesthood is appointed to preserve God's truth. Your lips are literally meant to be a reservoir of divine knowledge.
And it's so vital to remember the sheer rarity of this calling. In biblical times, divine selection was often revealed through casting lots. Whether it was Zechariah chosen for the temple duties, Jonas singled out in the middle of that raging storm, or Matthias replacing Judas, divine selection is incredibly specific. Out of millions of people, God has intentionally drawn your lot for a very specific mission.
So, what exactly is that mission? Well, as Paul declared in Acts chapter 13, verse 47, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Being chosen is absolutely not about having some elevated social or spiritual status. It's about being a highly functional, brightly burning light in an incredibly dark room. You are called to bring salvation to others. That's the job.
Which loops us right back to where we started in 1 Peter 2:9. Here is the core mandate, the whole shebang. Declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness. The ultimate, driving purpose of this magnificent priesthood is to loudly and clearly declare God's goodness and actively pull other people out of the darkness and into his marvelous light.
So, as we wrap up our explainer today, I really want to leave you with this challenging thought. Are you just claiming the title of the royal priesthood because it sounds nice, or are you truly doing the hard daily work of bringing people into the marvelous light? It is so easy to just enjoy the title, but the real calling, that's found in the humility and the service. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this inspires you to live out your royal calling with true grace and purpose.